Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. BAM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope you all are doing well this morning. We have an updated forecast as we head into the month of July. New outlooks that we published yesterday on the Clarity app. So if you have not checked those out yet, be sure to scroll through the latest updates, and we'll be continuing to add new maps in there for the fall season as we go throughout this week. But let's start out with the short term, guys, and then we'll get into the extended range you can see here over the next 7 days. This is still the corridor that we're keeping an eye on for the heaviest rainfall potential. In fact, if we turn on the current radar right now, guys, you can see heavy rains ongoing. In fact, some flash flood warnings across southern portions of Iowa, guys. This boundary just stalled out here across parts of the Central Plains and into the Midwest. It will linger here the next couple of days, leading to additional heavy rainfall potential, in even coming back a little bit further to the north in eastern Nebraska and central and northern parts of Iowa and into southern Minnesota. And so certainly some heavy rain as we go over the next few days. And again, here's kind of how things should average out the next 7 days. And again, you have the boundary in the short term, but what we will start to see as the ridge of high pressure breaks down is we'll start to see storm cluster activity beginning to kind of dive down to the south and to the east in this region in here as we work into the weekend and into early next week. And I wouldn't be shocked if the data here even has room to trend a little bit more active a little bit further south as that ridge weakens. Would not be shocked to see this filled in at least a little bit more. I do think that the American data, the European data may be a little bit too broad brush with 1 inch plus totals in here. But don't be shocked to see, as we work late in the week 1 time frame, more storm and storm cluster activity beginning to develop in parts of the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. So it's active, generally speaking, here for the primary growing regions, but the further south and west that you go, the less active that it will be, more pop-up activity than anything as we go over the next several days. In terms of how we average things out over the next 2 weeks, you can see here next 7 days, continuing to deal with that heat, especially the eastern portion of the country, more record-breaking warmth. Today, along the eastern seaboard, temperatures average out well above normal the next 7 days. We talked about precip the next 7 days. As we go into the week 2 time frame, or the first week of July, if you will, generally expecting temperatures to continue to average out warmer than normal. Now, I do think that especially in this region in here, there is a moderation as we start out this period. We have a storm system and a front here, the 28th to the 30th. As that moves through, likely we'll see a little bit of a moderation, but overall, I would say no major pattern driver changes. And as we roll into July, I would anticipate that a good portion of the northern tier of the U.S. continues to run warmer than normal. With that, guys, I expect the pattern to be active. We'll have a higher area of pressure that will develop here across the south central plains. As that happens, we'll see this monsoonal flow pick up here across the desert southwest, and then we'll see that storm cluster type of a pattern developing across parts of the Midwest and into the Ohio Valley. Now, I do think that if you're further south, early in this week 2 time frame, early to start July, there can be a little bit more rains a little bit further south, but I do think with time, that corridor of heavier moisture will shift back to the north, and you can kind of see this here. This is the 5 to 10 day time frame or so, maybe more like the 6 to 11 day time frame of the GFS model, out through the 5th or the 6th of the month, and you can see trying to pick up on this more active storm cluster pattern as we get into the start of July. And if we take a look at the European model, it's the same type of a deal, slightly different orientation, slightly different in the intensity, but certainly does look like we will see an uptick in rain and storm cluster activity for the Midwest and into the Great Lakes as we start out the month of July. And you can kind of see the reason for this. We've got that dome of heat and high pressure setting up over the next couple of days across the southeastern portion of the country, sending most of the moisture kind of around the top of the ridge here in the short term. But what starts to happen is this ridge begins to weaken, begins to break down a little bit, guys. And as that happens in the late week 1 time frame, late this weekend and into early next week, you initially start to get some storm cluster activity up here. And then what starts to happen is this front will sag even a little bit further south. You'll bring rains more so into the southern plains, more into the Tennessee Valley. And then as we go further down the line, as we work into that first week of July, you can see the ridge begins to kind of pump back up to the north. And then this corridor in here will be where that storm cluster activity sets up. Regardless, the bottom line is plenty of rain chances ahead for the primary growing regions. No real big red flag in terms of consistent or widespread dryness, though I do think that you get into a little bit of that have and have nots pattern where there can be spots that get skipped over. Someone down the road, 5, 10, 15 miles down the road, gets heavy rain, inch or two of rain in a system, and you get completely missed out. That's the type of pattern that will likely be setting up, but more than not are able to cash in on those timely rains. This continues to be the biggest pattern driver as we go through the rest of June and into July. It's our global winds. They've been dropping more and more consistently negative. You can see these are all the old runs. Data has had a positive bias, and generally speaking, we continue to trend more and more negative. I would anticipate that to continue heading into July, and if you take a look at the correlation, well, generally favors a more widespread, warmer than normal pattern. Now, it does favor the core of the warmth to set up a little bit further north and west than June. It was more in here. But regardless, the overall theme is warmer. If you look at East Asia, it's also, generally speaking, a warmer signal as we go into the early part of July. I would say one potential thing that has been relatively consistent as we've gone throughout June, the western third of the country has been very hot. We've had stretches where things have moderated, but generally speaking, it's been hot in the west. And if you take a look at overall global wind analogs heading into July, you can kind of see that signal there. And so my anticipation heading into June is that your corridor of the most consistent heat and hotter than normal temperatures will have the tendency to set up in here. What can happen at times, and Michael touched on this yesterday, is that it can bleed in and trend stronger and further to the east. But when it's more situated out here, you can actually get some fronts to work into the eastern part of the country. I just think, and you can see it here on this analog, it's going to be difficult to see temperatures averaging out seasonal to below normal, because when it gets warm, it can get pretty warm. We saw that here in June, and I think that there can be bouts of that into July further east as well. In terms of precipitation for these years, pretty similar to what we've dealt with the June precipitation pattern. This has been the area that's been the most active, and then at times you've had these storm clusters and rain activity to go into the central plains, and so more of the same with that type of idea into July. Taking a look at some data, this is the CFS. I think it kind of highlights the push and pull of the heat and the ridge pretty well. As we go throughout parts of July, at times the core of the heat will be more so in the west, leading to moderation at times in the eastern ag belt and the eastern part of the country, with warmer than normal temperatures, I think continuing generally in the northern east portion of the country. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And then at times the ridge can expand, and more widespread warmer than normal temperatures here will bleed across the country, and even at times I wouldn't be shocked to see more bouts of heat in the eastern U.S. as well. One of the reasons that I think the East Coast can probably remain a little bit warmer than normal, this warm blob in the Atlantic has continued to intensify and expand. Just the feedback from that will tend to favor a ridge and that stronger Bermuda high. I think that the eastern portion of the country, in terms of the East Coast, let's say, can continue to average out warmer than normal heading into July. And if we look at top analogs for the weeks 3 and 4 time frame, shows the idea, I think, very well. Core of the warmth in the Mountain West, warmer than normal across the northern tier of the U.S. and the northeastern portion of the country. Looks a lot like the GEFS weekly forecast here, guys. Overall, warmth will win out. If there's an area that sees fronts and moderation at times, it's likely going to kind of be in this area with troughs and fronts coming down from the north. So overall, decent consistency between analogs and data on that idea. In terms of precipitation here, guys, you can see overall continuing to favor more activity further south and east. You can also kind of see the hints of this ring of fire pattern through this area in here. So not bone dry really across the central plains and the upper Midwest. And actually the EPS weekly matches with this type of idea very well. You can see the pattern. Your high kind of sets up right through here. Then you push storms and moisture around it through this region in here with the wettest conditions in the eastern third of the country. And if we take a look at the CFS monthly, you can see temperatures here pretty close to the idea that we just showed with analogs and data. Precipitation, pretty similar here there. So we have a pretty consistent signal between data, analogs, and pattern drivers heading into July. And with that in mind, here's our weeks 3 and 4 outlook. Again, at times you can see some moderations through this region in here, but I do think the northern and the eastern part of the country can average out warmer than normal because when it gets hot, it will be pretty hot. And again, as Michael talked about yesterday, you can kind of see the push and the pull of the ridge at times. It'll spread across the country, get very hot for a time, then you'll have a moderation across the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the southeastern part of the country. Most consistent heat, though, will be across the northern plains, Canadian prairies, and into the Mountain West. In terms of precipitation, here's the idea, guys. Again, you can see the wetter risk the further east that you go through the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, the deep south. Some monsoonal flow into the desert southwest, Mountain West at times. In the middle here, there will be rains. There will be timely rains. But this circled area, which, accounts for a good portion of the ag belt, messy. I think that you're not bone dry in here, but I also don't necessarily think you're soaked. There can probably be stretches where there are gaps in precipitation, some spots that get skipped over, and you deal with that the messy have and have nots. Where, again, 15, 20, 30, 50 miles down the road, they get a lot of rain in the system, and you get skipped over. And so I do want to make that very clear that it is one of those types of patterns where it's not going to be as uniform. Do I have major concerns of widespread drought picking up in this area? I don't. But there can be some spots that continue to be more locally dry if you get skipped out on some of these storm clusters. Really, really going to be a critical time, I think, to be utilizing that Clarity platform, to be utilizing the chat feature, if you have access to it, to be watching the local forecast videos and the insights and the nowcasts, because it's the human element in this type of a pattern that's going to be able to prevail. Model data notoriously struggles in this type of a pattern, and so just being able to look at our insights, I think, are going to be really, really as important as it's been as we go through the first half of July. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of your day.